everyone, and welcome back to another round of book club. It's been a while as we've all been transitioning back into live music projects, but we're now bringing back book club once a term for anyone who wants to connect the world of research to the reality of their practice. So just a reminder, I'm Hannah and this is Gail, and we are co-founders of Soundcastle and also community music practitioners ourselves. So we're going to be bringing our own experiences into this and really trying to make some of the theory come to life and illustrate it for everyone. Just a reminder that this book club is for you as well and for your voices, and we would love for you to get involved. So take a look at the live chat section on YouTube. Please do put your comments, thoughts, ideas in that chat section, and we can keep it bubbling with all the voices of our Soundcastle community. And as always, just a reminder that within the Soundcastle community, we are a varied bunch from really seasoned, experienced community music practitioners to people who are at the very start of their careers. And all voices, all input are valued and welcomed. There's no judgment here. We just want everyone to feel like they can get stuck in and get involved. Have I missed anything, Gail, or is that the crux?
That's it. We're all here ready to deep dive.
Yeah, brilliant. And our deep dive today is back into Lee Higgins' Community Music in Theory and in Practice. Gail and I were just saying how much we love this book. We just feel like it's a seminal text, and as we read it, we can see what we do just highlighted in it time and time again. Lee Higgins is director of the International Centre for Community Music based at St John's University. They're doing brilliant work, so definitely check them out. And I thought we could start today, Gail, by just checking in a bit with you about why you value research and why you enjoy connecting it to your practice. Why are we doing all this reading?
So for me, it's something that's crept alongside my development as a practitioner, because I'm very much like a practical lover. I love being out and doing and making. But sometimes there's a lot of information coming from the live work, and having the academia gives me a space to think about it from different perspectives and in ways which I might not have thought of. Sometimes it just gives me clarity on a perspective. It helps me challenge my assumptions of what's going on. And actually, in the chapter that we're about to dive into, it also, Lee Higgins sort of reminds us about this idea of legacy and the fact that it can feel quite lonely in lots of ways. Being a community music practitioner, you're not in traditional art spaces or outside the regular movement of things. And a lot of the academia is very helpful for connecting to part of a group, like a hive mind that's been going on for decades and decades and even longer in terms of philosophy, and to other cultures and in different spaces. So it gives you that sense of connection, which I think can be absolutely invaluable when you really feel like you're faced with the ongoing challenges of community and society and everything.
I couldn't agree more. And that brings it back, doesn't it, to the fact that not only are we working with different communities, but we're a community of practitioners ourselves, and we need to somehow tap into that community because it's not always obviously present for us.
Absolutely.
Great. So shall we dive in? Shall we do it?
Yes.
So we are working with chapter 8 today, which is Acts of Hospitality, and we're exploring this idea of hospitality within community music settings. And our first quote is, "It is through the embrace of unconditional hospitality that musicians can exert a welcome that fertilizes a network of shared relationships, creating what is generally understood as a sense of community." So Gail, I thought what could be quite nice is if we start by thinking about what does unconditional hospitality look like to you in your practice, in your music programs, and how might this unconditional hospitality contribute to a sense of community?
For me, that definitely brings up this sense of what happens when somebody arrives at a session, and it very heavily makes me think of when it's your first session and when you come into a space. Are you able to come in and stay? Which I know sounds really sort of basic and the beginning. But I do think there's this idea of you are in some way a stranger and an unknown person, and you're going to arrive into this space where some part of you has chosen to get in there, and how you arrive is so fundamental. Whether you're a new mum or a carer, or you're looking for somewhere to connect, to get more support for your mental health in different places, that arrival. And so being unconditional is being completely open to people coming as they are and who they are. Earlier in the chapter, Lee Higgins talks about the root of the word host and hostile is the same, and this idea of the sort of danger, this feeling of how those can be two sides of the same coin. If you come into a space and you find it hostile, obviously you're going to run a mile, and there might be lots of barriers and reasons why you might find spaces hostile, even with all the best intentions. So I think it's really the unconditional is being open to who is arriving, and that they can arrive. They need to be able to arrive as they are in order to connect and take the next steps on the creative journey. Does that include your practice?
I really resonate with that. And I think there's, we're, as facilitators, we're actively asking people to step in to music making with us. And stepping into anything can be really terrifying. Even for those of us who, we might not be coping with a mental health condition, we might feel like generally in life we're pretty confident, but actually step into a room with a group of strangers and start singing or sharing creative ideas is an incredibly vulnerable act. And as facilitators, I think we have to remember that. It always comes back to this idea of the safe space. How can we create a welcoming, hospitable environment where we're saying, you and your voice are valued and we want to hear from you? And that can be incredibly hard if you're a recent mom with a new baby and a toddler, and maybe your own voice hasn't taken priority for quite a long time. How do we make that mom feel her voice is valued in this setting?
I think it's also, there's like the two levels of it, aren't it? There's like the unconditional moment you step into the room. This is also making me think that there's all the groundwork that we do, and as a community musician, if you're setting up a project or a project space, not most of the time not in education or with inside some kind of institution, there's quite a lot of groundwork that's like, how does someone even receive that invitation? Again, in the chapter they talk about a prison project and how prisoners are invited, and sort of not calling it a choir, just saying like, come to a singing group, and understanding that those mechanisms of how people actually get the invite and that's received, and all the communication that might go ahead. Like, I know for like the mental health spaces that we run, sometimes there's lots of communication before someone physically arrives, and I think all of that is about being unconditional. Sometimes in London we're working with people, English is a second language, they may have just arrived, they're coming through, forms and paperwork and all that kind of things is complicated and can be hostile rather than hospitable. So understanding how all of that plays into it, and like our responsibility as a charity and to our partners and all those kind of things, which can get really high level, but then what we're understanding is we're trying to make it hospitable for somebody to come through and be in the room with us in a way that allows us to get onto the stuff we're all really interested in and talk about a lot, which is the music making. But it actually is everything else before that that can really make or break whether someone makes that step.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to frame that when we say unconditional hospitality, it's always a context bound or context specific unconditional hospitality. So, for example, I work with people in mental health recovery. The framework is it's a mental health aware environment. And you can come in there, and if you're feeling incredibly anxious one day, that will be understood. There will be no judgment, and we will create a hospitable space that can hold people who are feeling that way. So it's always the framework that we're working within, and that's what shapes the nature of the hospitality itself.
Yeah, I love his the like thing of calling it context bound. Then I would definitely say site specific or context specific. The idea of something being completely bound to its place really allows you. It doesn't give you any excuse for just translating one framework from one setting to another, but always making sure that you're understanding the context that you're in. Because I know, like, for example, in mental health recovery, we don't need people just landing in at any point. It's really hard to be hospitable in that way. Whereas with some of our family projects, the sessions need to be open so that someone, a family with young children, can turn up 5 minutes from the end of the session because they've made it, and it needs to be hospitable anyway, because otherwise then maybe next week they'll get it out the house 5 minutes earlier, but they always know they can come and we're always there. And I think, like, it's not like there's one way that's better or worse. It's really important that it's always shifting with who can do it, and that sometimes you put boundaries in to make the spaces safe, so that when that person does arrive, for example, in mental health, then they can arrive. There is the capacity within the space to be welcoming, and it's different frameworks for different groups, but in every case, we're thinking about that moment of arrival and being able to opt in and how that will perpetuate engagement, basically.
That's exactly it. And knowing that one size fits all just can't apply in community music. As soon as you shift the setting or the context, the framework is also going to shift.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
brings us on quite nicely, actually, to the second quote that we're looking at today, which ties into everything you've just been saying. Okay, so here we go. Community as a prefix to community music is a gesture toward an open door policy, a greeting to strangers, extending in advance and without full knowledge of its consequences. New participants do not simply cross a threshold with the intention of joining a community music project. Any new welcome is always also a direct challenge to what has been currently constituted. So, what I wanted to explore out of this one was this idea of, we both work on long-term community music programs, something that's always there, that people know is always there, this safe creative home they can come to. And so what I wanted to hear about from you, Gail, was what happens when new people come in, and what is the impact of that on how you facilitate?
So I feel in the family things, in the family sessions and musical beacons, there's sort of an implicit understanding, because it's an early years based space, that, and a lot of the stuff we're doing right now, so this is really right now, is very, very play based. And what I found, this is partly coming out of COVID and in different spaces, I'm really, really working on making people feel welcome and able to have their kids run around, and also having very nervous children, and then kids who are just so overwhelmed by seeing lots of instruments and toys and things, that it having people come in, it will shift the energy. So it might be a very quiet room, and then like noise will come in with it, or they might feel like if activity is going on, it's focused, it can make people not feel included when they come in. So having spaces and frameworks and facilitation teams, so more than one, we always work in at least two. And the setting that I'm thinking of particularly, we have 4 of us there, which allows somebody to come in and be like the guide, the host, the person, like the mediator, that allows them to find their gap in their space for where they can go. And that we as a team are really excited about the fact that the new person coming in shifts the energy of it, and it's not a threat. It takes us back to the idea of shifting and new communities forming and breaking apart, and new individuals challenging constituted communities. That a new person coming in can shift that energy, but we want to welcome it, because we're thinking about the unconditional and the fact that opting in is a big step. So we have to just find that way of how accept and acknowledge and understand that energy shift, and let them come in and out. It can be equally like with particularly nervous, or like even with kids, you're having a bad day, 15 minutes in that session is enough, and then you go, and understanding that as the way they engage with it or not. Or I know in some, like in the mental health spaces, allowing people to step out and come in again. All of that in a way is this movement that shifts the flow of a room, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And I think there's it's interesting reflecting on the mental health settings, because there are some differences but also similarities in the way that you've been running the early years settings. And we always say we only actively recruit new community members at the start of a term, so they can have those first few sessions at least all together with the group, where we're building trust and we're building confidence, sometimes to even step foot in the room. And it is so much more scary to step foot in the room 8 sessions down the line when the group has already forged itself as a community. But what we tend to do is the existing community members have started creating a buddy system for new people. They're wanting to reach out, they're wanting to support them to attend. They realize it's scary coming to attend a new group, especially if you already have high levels of anxiety. And that's amazing to see the community start taking responsibility for its own growth and its own development. And that actually leads us on into the next section, which fits so well with this, which is the open welcome is a challenge to those who are already participants, because you must be ready to be hospitable yourself to provide a space for more. And that's where, in our project, the People's Music Collective in Worthing, I feel so amazed at the hospitality of the current group, and they actively check in on new members, and give them praise and give peer support and help people to feel good about themselves. I'm wondering what that looks like in a family music setting.
Yeah, I think it still exists there, but it's definitely a more informal. Um, it's an informal thing, but I think it's a process, and I think sometimes I early on in projects, in various points, I thought, oh, we should start a buddy system, we should do it. But actually, I know that in the PMT it's emerged quite organically, and they've decided they want to do it. And within the family settings, there are just certain like parents or carers who end up taking on these roles and become like a host. They feel like it's they welcome new people in. Like they might share the language, so they can chat them through and say hello. They might encourage their child to share toys with the other people's children, or sort of demonstrate ways of dancing and doing movements just to encourage the energy of the room. I think that happens informally, and it feels like it's important that it's informal in the family settings, because sort of demanding that someone with a 2-year-old turns up somewhere exactly on time doesn't feel appropriate to the space. But nurturing those, it's like an indicator. It is an indicator that a space is working well when when the community feels able to host people inside it themselves, and it's not just the facilitation team doing the work. And I think that is something we've always aimed for it, like within our theory of practice, this idea of like the group nurturing the equality and the equity and the welcome. I think you could definitely say is within that of the room, and that it's something within our theory of change. We're thinking about music as a tool for well-being, and if these sessions become the way that people connect and bring each other into the spaces, we're looking at how does it reduce isolation and connection, and we're always looking at that as a signifier that things are going well. And if it comes in and it's really unfriendly, it's not that it's broken, but we need to get further down that process to working with us all to make the space more welcoming. It's not just something we switch on from, like, if you ground a project in somewhere completely new, like, you have to work to get that to happen. It's not just something that happens overnight.
To me, it's a sign when you first see the community members taking responsibility for the hospitality, that's a sign of a music program or project that has truly established itself, that's embedded, that is a part of the wider community. It's when, and for me, that's when community itself is established, when you
Yeah.
can see the members of the group giving a hospitable welcome to new members. That is a sign of community for me.
It also makes me think about, in the previous quote, the without full knowledge of its consequences, and thinking about project spaces and leaving space. And for me, like not having full knowledge of the consequences is a massive strength of the work that we do. Is not coming in with like all the music planned and all the activities planned, that there's space. And so making space so that the community can be hospitable is also a choice that you make. Like you can have, I mean, this imagine like funding is endless on it, but you could have somebody on the door, you can have hosts, you can have people covering all the things that are happening, and that's one kind of space. But actually, if you take some of that away, it's incredible how many people will step forward. Or we've had projects where like the kids are taking over the project management speeches, and parents, bring, and people bring cakes. It's all like pre-COVID. But there are ways in which people can step in, and understanding and recognizing those moments is a really, really important part of the bit around the music making, and how much that can push the music making forward, because they feel that ownership will only tip over into the creative work that you do.
Yeah, and the ownership can only happen if we as facilitators relinquish some control.
Yeah, that is
Um,
like the key for sure. I mean, like, go do less work, which seems so I don't know. There's something in like the training of, or definitely in my training, that was like do more, do absolutely as much as you can, and actually can be completely counterintuitive.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so that brings us to our last reflection point today. So we have community music as hospitality requires the embrace of those who wish to participate in music making within the limits of what is not known to be possible. Community musicians might think beyond comfortable understandings of what usually constitutes community, and as a result, may be more successful in providing increased and richer opportunities for participants' voices to be heard. So, what I would like to chat about is, what does that look like in reality? What is making music within the limits of what's not known to be possible?
I think there's something really important around flexibility, and that's what's scary as a musician, particularly if you've trained in a particular genre or area, or even like instrument. Um, there's something about being open to embrace things yourself, have influences come that aren't yours, and let them be musical in the room, even though you're not the expert in it, for example. So that might be styles of music, that might be rhythm, it might be, I do a lot of work, voice, singing, body. I'm not a dancer, I'm not a trained singer, but it's absolutely key. And I do use my instruments, but it's part of a huge, like, it's, what's the word? It's part of this like ecology of everything that could possibly happen in a session. And even now, I need to not know exactly what it will be, or even if I get in a situation that's familiar, similar rhythms coming up, be open to the fact that it might be slightly different, and not just go into autopilot. And like there's often talk about tools and toolkits, and the danger with those is definitely that you just go into the one size fits all. We know this one, we know how this one will run, we can just do it. And sometimes you need those, like focus room, or bring them together, but having that flexibility to break those as well when they're much loved tools and toolkits. um
And they're our safety net, aren't they? They can be our safety net to fall back onto. And again, that comes back to being comfortable with the unknown and
yeah,
knowing that there's strength in the unknown. Relinquishing that bit of control is just so fundamental. Like,
and it is, I think, what we were saying before about having agency. Like, if you're going to write a piece of music, you need to have opinions and thoughts, and be able to experiment and choose and discuss and pull things in different directions. So if you are not willing to relinquish that agency as a facilitator, how can other people step in? Because there is always that hierarchy. You're the musician, and then a lot of the time people coming in either as considering themselves like amateurs, or I'm not a musician, which is something we hear very regularly within projects, which makes an actual collaboration quite difficult, because they will always defer to you as your opinion. And so bringing up their feeling that they can say stuff, and then when it's unexpected, we welcome it, which is again hospitality. So it's like, I never thought of that, let's go, let's run with this, let's do this style, let's use these instruments, let's write these kind of lyrics.
and like coming back to that idea of music without limits. For me, so much of that comes down to not making assumptions about the people I'm working with. So, in a mental health environment, if you're not careful, you can end up doing nothing because you're so scared of triggering someone. And that is making an assumption about what that person is able to cope with. So I actually really like coming back to Liz Lerman for this in her community dance practice. She always emphasised that she asks people in the room to take responsibility for their well-being and how they're going to engage in the session. And so, for example, we would make it very clear, we're going to explore these things in today's session. Please engage in the way that you feel comfortable to. Because for one person, their level of challenge on that day is going to be to step in and start singing like an opera singer. And for another person, their level of challenge is going to be to do the quietest hum. But that is still a valuable contribution. And I should never assume that on any given day, they're not going to be able to step in and start singing like an opera singer.
Yeah. I think also, I remember when you started to articulate that really clearly inside the sessions, and how I was just, it was really exciting to see that it's not just something that you can be like, I just value everyone. It's like in the background of what I do, which sometimes it is important to carry this stuff with you, but the actual like making it completely explicit that this is what we're asking you, and whatever your because it's about bodies and physical being able to do what you need to do. See, like when I see like parents and kids in the same space, and how parents have asked for permission to do everything, and the kids just a lot of the time, once they realize they can go everywhere, they will go. And I think that thing when you finally were like, this is your responsibility, and this is where we are, and we can talk about it, and it can go backwards and forwards in different ways, and sometimes we can hold, like, metaphorically hold hands to make these steps, and sometimes I know that you can do it, and if you want to, you will. It's really the power of that is really being explicit about it is, I think, is really exciting. And I think you can feel like the energy in the room is suddenly like, oh, what could I step forward to? It feels really exciting.
Yeah. And as soon as you're explicit, you're entering into a dialogue. You're doing what we say is so important. You're opening space. You're giving people permission to engage however they need to on that particular day.
Which is the unknown consequences, because that's what's scary. You're like, I'm going to open a space, and then your challenge is not to fill it yourself.
Exactly. And then whatever happens, happens. And that is the strength, because you've given the community members the agency that then enables them to grow that sense of community together.
Yeah, and then take it elsewhere in their lives. Is that also that steps? It's that growing, the ripples, it goes out into many other aspects of what they're doing.
Exactly. And that's when we can start truly measuring the social impact of our work.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're nearly at the end of our session today. I could talk with you about this all day. But we were going to round up just on a reflective question for everyone who's watching this book club, who's feeling engaged in this session, to take away to your own community music practices. And our question is, where is the unknown in your practice? And how can you explore this as a strength? So we really hope that feels like some valuable reflecting time. I know I've spent so much time feeling terrified of the unknown, and it's taken me a long personal journey to start to embrace it. But now I can see how it gives communities agency, and that's what's so exciting.
And I think like exploring it as a strength is just about taking a moment to shift your perspective on it, just in case there's something which is feeling really heavy and so challenging as a facilitator. It's stepping into feeling not possible, but just having that, just exploring what it means. Like some stuff might be heavy and needs help, and that just helps you identify whether it's something that's actually is exciting scary, or whether it's get some support and help scary. And I think that is really key to having an enjoyable life as a facilitator, apart from anything else.
Exactly. Remembering that we're part of a community too. And you can come and find us on the Soundcastle community. If there's something that's feeling like a struggle, or like you want extra support, come there. There are so many voices that will respond to any post you leave. And there's a wealth of resources and reflective ideas going on. So do come and join us there. Thank you so much, Gail, for doing this book club with me.
My pleasure. Always a delight to chat.
I love chatting it all through. And for everyone else who's joined us, thank you so much for your engagement, for being a part of this. We will be back with the next Soundcastle Book Club in the summer term. There's going to be one per term from now on. So please do keep an eye out on the Soundcastle community for the next one and join us there. In the meantime, happy music making. Thank you,
Happy music
everyone.
making.
Bye.